mainly just like pushed entrepreneurship and thinking outside of the box, and push like tech from early, that type of stuff. So that's kind of like some of the inceptions of how I ended up in design.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So let's talk about, the transition from Jamaica to Toronto at kind of a later stage of teenagehood. Sometimes people move from wherever they might be from. Like my family's from Tanzania, from East Africa. I know
Okay.
a lot of the guests we've had on have been from different places like South Asia or other islands in the southern areas of the world, and they moved here when they were younger, 5, 6, 7 years old. So talk about the experience of transitioning at such a later stage where you've already developed a lot of things, a lot of characteristics that you would carry on with you into adulthood. So what was that like? What was that like, meeting a whole bunch of new people and adjusting to maybe a slightly different lifestyle?
Honestly, it was pretty good. I think so. One of the things that probably made the transition easier is that I was coming here. So my dad was already here. I was coming here from like a young age. So I was coming here for like summers, and then towards the later stage, like 12, 13 summers and winters. So in terms of like being here, like I was kind of a little bit familiar with the place. So it wasn't like I didn't have like culture shock or anything. I think also like my personality. I just tried to make the most of where I am. I don't know if I'd say like I'm really outgoing, but like I'm not an introvert either. So I think I assimilated pretty well. I think one of the things that I think about even when I'm gonna like raise my kids is like, where would I raise my kids? I feel like having your kids raised in an environment where they see people like them being successful and stuff like that. So for example, growing up in Jamaica, you see like other Jamaicans, with like predominantly Black Jamaicans, doing things like being successful, right? Whereas in other like in North America, you don't necessarily see those examples as much. So I feel like growing up in Jamaica, I was able to kind of develop a sense of self, and like understand that, okay, it's not abnormal for like a Black person to be successful. I think that's one of the key things. So like developing a great sense of self, I think like in my experience, a lot of people are sometimes like lost because they're like bombarded with all the negative imagery on like social media or just media in general, seeing like negative images of like, or like Black stereotypes that affects how people are raised in countries that are not predominantly Black. So I think it was beneficial for me to kind of transition later in life. I didn't really experience any culture shock. I think I assimilated pretty easily. So I think it was beneficial, for me at least, to come at a later stage. But I know people who've had like not so great experiences like transitioning later in life as well. So it could go both ways.
I hear you, and I'm very happy that you share what you just shared, because it kind of comes back to the root of why I started this podcast, why I started the t-shirts. The Culture Talks is supposed to be about, or VOV, the Voices of Value, is supposed to be about, individuals from minority, backgrounds that really didn't get to see people, or haven't at this current stage in their life seen many people that look like them succeeding or being successful, or being in careers like design, or being in careers like web development, or being in careers like, real estate, or whatever it might be. And so the goal of this podcast was to bring people on the show who have found some sort of success in these different fields, to help, younger people feel like they can also do that, or feel like they can also strive for something different than being a rapper or a basketball player, right? So I'm really glad you shared that, because it shows the diversity of lifestyle or thought processes from across the globe. People who grow up in Jamaica, or people who grow up in Tanzania, all they're seeing, of course, we see American TV over there too, but a lot of what they're seeing the celebrities, the personalities that they pay attention to, the people who are doing real estate or who have insurance businesses or who are building websites for the government are people from their country or people from the area. So they look like them and they know that there's more opportunities than just being an athlete or a musician, right? Which is typically, at least in the States, in my experience with my friends, typically all that people see and expect to be success for somebody that is of, you know, a darker skin tone or of a blessed melanin. You feel me? So I really like you. I really like you sharing that, you know, because that shows that, you know, you had a different experience than some other people may have had that was beneficial to you in a way. So that was dope. I'm glad you shared that. Um, so let's talk about the culture in Toronto, you know, because the funny thing is, if you listen to, at least me being American and like, you know, just being American. So, if you listen to the accents of like certain people from Toronto, certain areas of Toronto, and like the slang, and the same thing with, you know, UK culture and how UK culture has been blowing up right now, there's a lot of similarities, and I think it all stems from Jamaica or from that area, and the language and the twang and the slang. I think a lot of the roots come from Jamaica. Am I correct? You know, can you talk a little bit about that and the culture that you see in Toronto, or, you know, the things that we're seeing portrayed on TV now that Drake is hyping up UK culture and hyping up, you know, the culture that he grew up around in Toronto? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of Jamaican influence within both Toronto and London. That stems from like the migration after like independence. So in London specifically, I know after independence, a lot of Jamaicans migrated there, and then towards like later years, a lot of Jamaicans migrated here. I think like Jamaicans are like they basically make their presence known. So a lot of the language and the slang that comes out of like specifically inner cities is heavily Jamaican influenced, and then it like takes on a life of its own, like based on the city that it's in. So in that sense, there's a lot of similarities in the lingo both here and in London. So there's definitely a lot of Jamaican influence here. In terms of Toronto specifically, the culture is pretty multicultural. Um, so there's people from all over. It's definitely not as much of a melting pot as like it seems from the outside looking in.
Interesting.
Yeah, we definitely experience a lot of like not as overt racism, but covert racism. So people are a lot like me, myself, my friends, like we've all experienced um like racism here. But that being said, it is a great like I feel like those things can happen wherever you are. It's definitely like I'd recommend it as somewhere to live. I definitely enjoy living here. But it definitely doesn't come with. It's not like a bed of roses that like a lot of people from the outside looking in may think. There's a lot of great food here. The summers here are great. Um, Me specifically, I enjoy the winters as well. 'Cause I do a lot of winter sports, specifically skiing.
Sick,
But yeah,
sick.
it's it's a great city to be in. Because of the mix of cultures, because of like food specifically. When I think about cities, I think about food is one of the main things that draws me to cities. And a lot of the people definitely do intermingle, even though, as I mentioned, there's still those challenges that any person that looks like us can probably relate to.
Right. And it's funny because we like definitely from the outside looking in, and especially recently in the past few years, people definitely look at Toronto as like this massive melting pot. So it's interesting to hear your perspective. Also, it's funny because I've had three other guests from Toronto, all of different backgrounds. I had Pollyanna Reed. She's a I don't remember what she said her family's background was, but you know, a beautiful black sister that came on here and talked a lot about business. Definitely suggest listeners to go check that episode out, and of course you as well, my guy. And
For
then I
sure.
have my guy Branova, who I believe I think he's of South Asian descent, but I can't remember exactly where. But also from Toronto, also a marketing guy out of Toronto. So it's been dope having different people on from over there and hearing all of you guys' perspectives about the city. But one thing everyone says is they love the food. So I'll definitely have to slide out there to taste a few things. Um, I did want to ask though, skiing, my guy, how'd you get into skiing?
Um, so back when, like I was mentioning, I used to come here like towards like the like my adolescent years, 12, 13. That's when I started coming in the winters because that's when my father thought that okay, we could handle the cold. And like for him, he always like we always did a lot of activities, we traveled a lot. And then for me, I just like trying new things. So I remember the first time we ever went skiing, he took us to some resorts and I started skiing like on the learn to ski. Then they had us on like the baby slopes, and I was like, "Yo, this is too small." Then I started to go on the big slopes, and then I enjoyed it so much. He actually gave me like he left everybody went in and left me on the slopes, and he told me to come in at a certain time, and I didn't come in at that time. He had to come out and come get me. I don't remember if it was like 9 o'clock or something, and I was out there till like the lifts closed. And he came out, so I learned then, like, and I just really enjoyed it, like from the first time doing it. So from then, like, a winter hasn't really passed without me doing it. I've been to like a bunch of different mountains. I've been to Whistler, that's in out in like BC, Vancouver area. I've been to Mont Tremblant, but it's just something that like I really enjoy. So it's kind of ironic that I'm from Jamaica, but I love skiing. But it is what it is.
Yo, and I know this isn't skiing, but I'm not gonna lie. The first thing that popped in my head is that bobsled movie. You know what I'm talking about? Yep, immediately. My little niece, she watches it like once a week, bro. Like once a week. It's crazy. So that's dope, man. That's dope. I did want to ask though, speaking of early interests like skiing, what were some other early interests, early hobbies that you got into, during your adolescence before you started moving towards design and moving towards which we'll get to here shortly. But what were some of your early interests, whether it was physical or in sport or whether it was, chess, whatever it might have been? So what were some of your early interests?
Um, so I had like I play a lot of sports. So I used to play cricket. I played tennis. I used to swim. I think those are some of like the sports that I used to do a lot. Me and my friends used to throw parties back in the day. So like high school in Jamaica. Um, yeah, I think, and I was always like, I was always designing in some form or another. So I had a computer pretty early. I used to do flyers. I remember me and my sister used to like print a bunch of different stuff, like just random stuff on Wikipedia and do our own thing with them and sell them in school. So I was always around a computer. So I always just like playing around with stuff on the computer. I did technical drawing in high school, which I really enjoyed. My undergraduate degrees in architecture and economics. So I was always like kind of drawn to like computers and design in some way. And I've always been extremely physical. I love also like outdoor stuff. So I love riding sea-doos. I like riding quads. Like I love like just outdoorsy stuff. So
An active life, yo. Ladies and gentlemen, is it just me or does Drew sound like a very, very entertaining person to hang out with? I feel like everybody should be hitting him, throw him $1,000 for a tour guide when you get to Toronto. You know what I'm saying?
I do. Oh, I like to cook as well too. So and I love eating. So
Okay. First, what's your go-to meal? If somebody was to, no, I got you. Let me set it up. And all right, so no disrespect if you already have a lady or not, but either way, say a lady pulls up, she's like, yo, like we should have dinner, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna cook for you. What are you gonna cook? What's the first thing you're gonna make?
okay. I'll probably whip up like a surf and turf. So like
Okay.
you know, like a steak with a lobster tail and some
Oh
mashed
shit.
potatoes and some mixed veggies.
Yo, that's on fire. Sheesh. Hey, y'all heard that. Y'all need to pay the man. Every time when you get in Toronto, find this man on Twitter, DM him, offer him $1,000 to cook and take you on quads and go skiing. You know what I'm saying? It sounds like a fun life. But that's what's up, brother. I love to hear that you're out here active, living life to the fullest and not letting any time pass you by, being boring and mundane. So that's super dope, man. So you mentioned that you got your undergraduate in architecture and what was it? Like architecture.
Economics.
Okay, dope. And what school did you end up going to? Like when you finished high school, your last year in high school in Canada or in Toronto, like what was your mind like? What made you decide what you were going to study or where you were going to go?
Yeah. So in terms of, so I had like, when I looked for schools, it was just all schools that offered architecture in in Ontario. So I applied to Ryerson University, University of Toronto, University of Waterloo. Um, but then I ended up going to University of Toronto because it's in Toronto, um, and it's like the best school in Toronto. So that was another thing, but also because I wanted to be in Toronto. Um, so yeah, I went to University of Toronto. In terms of like the decision behind that, um, honestly, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to be an architect, but I was like fascinated with design. Ideally, I wanted to be like a real estate developer, but I wanted to have, my rationale was having an understanding of architecture and design, and how the economics piece would be like the business piece, and I'd kind of put those two together. So I really wanted to kind of just oversee and be a developer. So that was my rationale behind choosing those majors. Um, so yeah.
And is that still part of your goals? All right. So we do know, well, I know we haven't shared yet, but you are a product designer, right?
Correct, correct.
Perfect. And we'll jump right into that too. But like outside of that, is your interest still lie, somewhere in the future or right now? Are you active in real estate investing or developing or anything with the architectural industry on that side? What are the goals over the next 5 to 10 years in regards to the work you're doing and where you're trying to go?
Yeah. So definitely, I don't think I could put myself in a box. I'm an entrepreneurial spirit, definitely passed on from my parents. So I feel like I'm loosely involved in like development projects, not to the scale that I want to be yet, but I do love product design. I feel like I'm at a stage where I'm investing, and ultimately I just want to have like both. Ultimately, I want an agency, and I want to be involved in like just having real estate investments. That's like ultimately everything. So I do like being like a part of construction projects and stuff, but I have a lot of interest. That's one of the reasons why I'm a product designer, because I'm able to kind of work on whatever interests me, like whatever field or project interests me, like, and wherever my head is at that time, I can work on that. So that's definitely why I'm in the field I'm in. But I do feel like ultimately I'm gonna have like different revenue streams, and obviously real estate will definitely be one of them. So
Of course, of course. And for people who don't know too much about design, what exactly is product design? Some people might be like only familiar with what's popularized or what they see online, which is like, okay, I know graphic design and I know UX design, and that's all I know. So what is product design? Can you explain what type of projects you work on? What are some skills that are necessary? What exactly does life as a product designer look like?
okay, so I could start with like generally like the parallels that I draw to kind of give the average person an idea of what product design is. That I would say, like, think of like an architect and like a building contractor, right? So the architect does the designs, and the contractor, the builder, actually builds the house. So think of the product design as the person like designing like web applications, um, and or web applications or mobile apps, or any digital product, and then the think of like the software engineer as the builder or the developer that actually like brings that idea to life. In terms of like a definition of product design, I would say it's creating digital products through a foundational, by getting a foundational understanding of the people that are going to be using those products, and then kind of marrying those user needs to the business goals. So that would be like a sort of definition I would give it.
I love it.
Ultimately, it's about like kind of de-risking going to market with a digital product from a business side.
Okay, so basically, like, and I'm getting kind of this thought because I did check out your website. One of the things I saw you do, at least with the fitness company that you worked with, that was creating a digital app to, I think, like an exercise library, if I'm remembering correct. And you created like you created an avatar. You created I forgot what her name was, Rebecca or something like that.
Mhm.
And you kind of broke down what she was interested in doing, what some of her issues were, what some of her challenges were. Can you kind of break down the process of how you created that and why you created that? Like, maybe reference exactly what I'm talking about, the
Mhm.
Rebecca from your website. Why did you create that outline, and how does that help you bring a product to life?
Yeah, I guess so to kind of also get into a part of the question that you asked earlier, like the difference between like product design versus graphic design. I think like product design encompasses like a lot of different skills. So like anthropology, psychology, like an understanding of people. Ultimately, it's like truly understanding people and then building something that addresses what their needs are. So in terms of the persona that who was Rebecca in that project that you're talking about, basically a persona kind of encompasses like all the insights that you get from user research. So for that specific project, I'd conducted user interviews. So based on talking to users from the target audience that app was for, um, gathered insights based on the feedback that they gave based on the questions that they were asked, and then after like extracting those insights, building a persona to as the foundation of the design decisions. So personas basically help you to kind of understand or like empathize with the person that you're designing the product for. And what that helps you to do is like not do things from your perspective. So it helps you to keep the person that's going to be using the application in mind, right? So
Right.
everybody has some sort of bias. Like even if you're not a designer, you know what bias is. So people have like their preconceived beliefs. So bias actually affects the like your work as a designer. So it kind of helps to mitigate that bias so that you're not imposing your thoughts on the design. You're designing for the person who's going to be using the product.
I love that. I love that because I think that translates across so many industries. I think a few people that have came on the show have just talked like for marketing and branding certain products or their businesses. Like too many times people try to think about what they think somebody
Mhm.
would feel, or no, people aren't gonna feel like this, or when they go to the store, they're not gonna feel like this. So, but no, that's how you feel, but how others might feel. So I like how you go about that. And I feel like people should run that back, if you're listening to this episode right now, especially if you're trying to get into marketing or trying to get into design or trying to even just in general build a business, which covers a lot of different things, design, branding, marketing, to think about that. Think about it not from your perspective and your personal biases, but from who your target audience is, and figure out how to create a persona. I would suggest you guys go actually check out Andrew's website and go look at what he did right there, because I'm sure there's a way that individuals out there can kind of take that same idea and flip it and use it for their business in their industry. So definitely run that part back and listen to that again. I thought that was really dope when I was, checking that out on your website.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm glad you brought that up too, because I feel like people generally think of like product and user experience design as specifically targeted to digital products, but the some of the methodologies and the principles that we use and that guide or design decisions can definitely be used to anything in life basically. So and particularly when you're working on a business. So a lot of the concepts about understanding people and what their needs are and what their like frustrations are and stuff like that. Understanding that can help you to kind of address those issues that they may have with solutions. So the user experience definitely encompasses things outside of just digital products.
yeah, and running it back to before we even started talking about product design itself, what exactly made you choose product design? There's so many different types of design. I mean, even me myself, I'm kind of thinking about maybe potentially a career change right now. So I'm looking at both software, development, and then also looking at, the design portion or UX UI design. But then I contacted a few friends who are already in design in successful positions and are tenured. Some of my, I guess you could say, mentors. I don't know if friends is the right thing for somebody that's 50 or 60 years older than me, but either way, I contacted them, and they were sharing so many different sections of design, sectors of design. How did you end up on product design? I mean, I know you went to school for architecture and economics, but during your time in university and during your time, maybe you did internships, or maybe you were just trying to navigate what direction you wanted to go in design. How did you end up there? How did you end up in product design?
Yeah. Honestly, I kind of, so even though like as I mentioned, I've always been doing some sort of design. How I got introduced to product design specifically was probably by accident. So I was like coding and stuff, and then I wanted to kind of formalize like my coding education like through a boot camp. Um, so like I was like building small websites and building small applications using code, and then I started looking into like one of the boot camps. Like I was looking across all the boot camps to kind of decide where like which one I was gonna take. Um, and then I started getting emails like because once you like sign up for like the packages and stuff, just to see the like the curriculum to make a decision based on that, they start sending you a bunch of emails. So I remember Brain Station specifically was the one that I saw. Like that's where the first thing I ever saw, like first place I ever saw UX design. And I was just like, what is this? Like I'm naturally curious. So I started looking into it, and then I noticed they had like an info session, which I signed up for. So like after looking into it, I'm like, I'm like interested in this. It sounds cool. It's design, and based on what I'm reading, it's like it's something that interests me. So then I actually went to the Brain Station info session, and it was like an interactive session. So like we weren't building apps, but there was little tasks that we had to do and like answer questions around like product design. So when I left that session, I'm like, okay, well, this is something I'm going to do. Like I'm really interested in. So I started doing additional research, and then it just honestly like how I ended up going in that direction. Like after doing all my research and stuff, I just realized that it kind of aligned with like everything I kind of want and like my lifestyle. So I'll give you like probably like a list of stuff. So one of the first things is like I love design. So so that was the first thing. Um, I wanted to at the time I wanted to like be able to do something that I could also make money off outside of my 9 to 5 job. So that was another thing. Um, I want in terms of another thing was like representation. So being in a field where like I can like others can see me, they can understand that just from me being in the field, like that might motivate them to take that step that they need. So that was something that's big to me. I think like also being from Jamaica, being able to like work in a field where you can actively work on products that kind of address specific issues that you're like concerned about. So no, there's like the tech scene is kind of accelerating in Jamaica, but there's like a lot of talented people in Jamaica that could be doing what I'm doing right now, but they just don't have access to those opportunities. So being able to like work on things that kind of bridge that gap and like help make technology more accessible is another thing. Another thing I do is like I'm passionate about like mentoring and stuff. Like before I got into product design, and still know like I used to tutor like underprivileged kids in coding. So that was something I was really passionate about, just exposing people that look like me, basically, to other ideas that they may not have ever thought about. So just like what you're talking about, like there's nothing wrong with being a basketball player or a or a rapper, but the like as with anything, there's like you have to have like an extremely hard work ethic. And quite frankly, like not everybody's meant to become a successful rapper, become a successful ball player. So I think like introducing people to ideas that they may have never heard about, but you can make a living and definitely like make a great living, like exploring those avenues, specifically creative avenues that like their parents may have never heard of and stuff like that. So that was one of the things as well. So enjoy. And then as I said, also I like working on different things. So I have a lot of interests, obviously. From the conversation, you can tell like I love doing a lot of different things. So that was another thing. So being able to kind of work on a bunch of different things, and I like being challenged as well. So it just basically encompass like all my interests.
Love it. I love it. And speaking of being challenged, you know, a lot of people when they're thinking about getting into an industry, they always look up the beautiful things about it. You know, all the benefits, the money, the lifestyle. They watch a TV show about it. They watch some Silicon Valley or something, and they just start seeing all the glory, right? Where they don't actually take too much time to invest in, you know, understanding the challenges of that position or that career field. So could you kind of touch on maybe 2 or 3 challenges that you faced as a product designer, or that you continually face, that sometimes make you be like, whoo, I'm tired of shit today, or, you know, make you feel like, damn, I really chose this route. What are some really challenging aspects of being a product designer for those who might be thinking about going into the field?
Um, so I would say the first thing is a lot of people think it's an easy transition. I don't like, it's definitely possible, especially if you like put your mind to it and you work towards it. But it's also a lot of hard work, especially if you want to be successful, if you want to work for great companies. I think a lot of people underestimate the amount of work it's going to take to break in the field, especially if you don't have a design background. I think one of the advantages I had was having a design background. So I'd say that's number one. I think a lot of that has to do with like how like institutions, I don't want to call out any particular institutions specifically, but how institutions sell the idea of getting into UX. And then coupled with that, a lot of people don't like do enough research and I guess self-evaluation, and aren't self-aware enough to know if, okay, this is something that is for them. I think so those two things together make people think it's easier to get into the field than it is. I think too, a lot of your work in the field is not actively designing anything. It's about like building personal relationships and dealing with stakeholders. And where you may understand the value of design as a designer, a lot of the people that you're working with day to day do not. And part of your job is to convey the value of design through your work. I think sometimes, depending on the people that you're working with, that can be not just the people. I think sometimes maybe the institution as well is not as design centered as you want it to be as a designer. So I think the fact that you have to keep selling the value of design and selling your ideas and kind of defending your ideas can be challenging. Like I personally don't necessarily have a problem with it. I think that's part of what I really should about being in design, is just like being able to show people the value of design. But it can be challenging, especially if you're coming into the field just expecting to just design. And then thirdly, I would say it's challenging, like just being a minority in design. So like being on teams where you don't necessarily see people that look like you, being on teams where like people might not think your ideas are valid because you don't look like them, because there's a sort of status quo about the culture. And a lot of times people like, you have to like work twice as hard to kind of prove yourself, just because people have biases that they live with that kind of affects how they perceive you. I think that could be something that's challenging as well. Um, Definitely not like on the specific, like those challenges are there. On a specific team I'm on, team is pretty great. But I think anybody, especially minorities coming in to the field, should know that they're just gonna have to work twice as hard. So I think those are the three things.
Amazing, amazing. And touching on what you just touched on, I did a little bit of research about product designers, and the industry itself. And something I came across was for 2020, you know, per usual, per most careers in the Western Hemisphere, the larger percentage of people in almost any industry except sports is typically, you know, white folk, which is okay. Shout out to white folk. But I did see that Black or African Americans only cover about 1.5% of the industry in regards to product design. Now, per usual, that's something we see across a lot of industries. So I feel like it's just it's such an interesting topic to think about, but also so dope to think that there's people like yourself who are getting into this field not only for their own interest, but also because they understand the benefits. They also understand how fun it might be in certain situations, and they understand the impact that they can have on certain situations, and so they get into it to be a source of inspiration to other young people, you know, of you know, minority backgrounds who can, you know, potentially be inspired to get into these industries to increase these percentages from 1.5 to maybe 15, maybe 20, you know. So that's really dope, that you mentioned that and shared that. One other thing that I did think was cool though, in regards to just minority populations, is that whether these statistics are completely correct or not, I did see that they discovered that about almost 25% of product designers are women, and around 68 are men. And I thought that was dope because that's, you know, that's a pretty large percentage of women. And I always think it's dope to see women representation in industries that you may not have expected it in. So that's super dope.
Yeah, I think this is just my personal opinion. I never like done any deep digging on it, but I feel like women are more empathetic than men. And I think one of the things that not just empathetic, but like more compassionate as well. I think what makes great product designers is like one of the fundamental, I guess, skills that you need to do is to be able to understand people. And I think a lot of the women that I've encountered like are the better of the product designers, and I think that's one of the reasons for that as well.
I love that. I love that. That's a super dope and important insight to think about. I mean, I agree. And I feel like anybody who takes a moment of consideration in their life to think about the women around them can probably agree that women tend to be a little bit more empathetic and compassionate, and understanding what skill sets you have naturally, and understanding what skill sets you have the ability to develop as well are important in regards to deciding what career you're going to go into. So any women that are listening right now, maybe product design is something to look into. If you're just trying to find a career and you're trying to think where you might go, might be something to look into. So that's super dope. I did want you to share, what do you think are, you just shared two, but what do you think are maybe two more character traits that are necessary, or skills that are necessary to be a great product designer?
I think you have to be comfortable with ambiguity. So, and I don't know if this is the correct term to describe like a lot of what we do, but like a lot of times you're building things that don't exist, and you're starting with like just a bunch of requirements and no like clear direction. So I think being able to create something tangible out of not thin air, but out of it not existing before. A lot of people probably get like overwhelmed when they don't have like a structured path to follow, or structured directions. I think that's something that's definitely important is being able to be comfortable with ambiguity. And definitely like critical thinking. Um, so like there's a lot of like hard problems that you have to solve. There's a lot of like aligning of or like back and forth of what's best for the business or what's best for the person using this product. I think a lot of times as designers we forget that we're operating within a business context. So yes, you want to advocate for the people that are using your products, but also you have to understand that it has to be like a driver of revenue for the business. So being able to like kind of straddle those lines, you need to be able to think critically. Also to like solve both business and user problems that exist. So I'd say like those are two other characteristics. I think to kind of cap that off and to kind of add to what we were talking about in the previous question, like a lot of your work has nothing to do with design, like nothing to do with like pixel pushing. And I think that's what a lot of people think about when they think of design. Definitely you need to have the hard skills. So don't neglect the hard skills, but a lot of your work is going to be like design strategy and dealing with stakeholders and things that have nothing to do with actually working in Figma. So yeah.
Love it. I love it. I love it. All right. So I have two final questions for you on the topic of design. Before we do a little walkthrough to provide some quote unquote extreme value for people who might be interested in getting into product design. So number one is, what are two things you wish you knew or two areas of focus you wish you would have focused on before getting into product design? What are things you wish you knew before getting into the industry, or two areas of focus you wish you focused on more while getting into the industry?
Mm-hmm. I definitely think like design strategy and product thinking are things. So like for the people listening that may not understand, just understanding like business goals more than I did before I came in. Like I had experience like in terms of family business and stuff like that. So I think back to like product design being aligned with like my already existing skills. I think understanding the importance of like strategy and business goals within the context of design. And let me see if I can think of a second thing that I wish I knew. I think just like being comfortable with like failing. So like I'm a bit of a perfectionist, but I think in design, like you have to be prepared to like to fail and like learn from your mistakes, and that ultimately leads to better products. And that comes back to like letting the people that you're building these products for kind of help you to tailor the product to them. So one thing specifically in design, we do a lot of like user testing on the products that we're building. Again, it doesn't matter what your personal preference is as a designer. You're using that feedback to kind of drive your design decisions. And it's pretty interesting to like be in testing sessions and you think you had a design nailed down, and then you just see people that struggling to use your design, right? So I think being comfortable with like failure and just being able to learn from your mistakes and not getting attached to your designs. Those are some things that I think would have been helpful. I think it's all a part of the journey as well. So to get back to the actual question, I think, yeah, those are things that I would have wished that like was more comfortable with earlier, but those are also like some of those things as you go along your design journey, they make you a better designer because you're learning as you go along. Right? So I feel like you're going to be constantly learning, constantly evolving. and that's how you become better. So
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for answering all those questions in such a great way. I think a lot of people who, don't know anything about design or don't know anything about product design or might be interested in the career or the industry, definitely could get value by running that back one more time for themselves. But one thing I do want to do is I want to walk through the process of, these are just your suggestions. Obviously, this isn't going to be perfect or the only route to go, but I want us together to break down how somebody can go from not being in the design world to being in it, employed or freelancing, and kind of just break down the process from zero to one, right? So if somebody wants to learn product design right now, they've never been in it before, but they want to learn it right now, are you suggesting them go through a boot camp? Are you suggesting they learn on their own if they're good at learning on their own? Or are you suggesting them to go to university? What would, obviously nothing's perfect, but I want you, just drop your suggestion. And if you don't mind, if you choose university or boot camp, maybe dropping a good option, regardless of where they live in the world.
So I think, and a lot of people might not like it. All depends, right? So if there's a lot of self-taught designers, there's designers that went to boot camps, there's designers that went to university, and all of them have their pros and cons, right? So I think I can I'll address it from that kind of angle. So the thing that's great about universities, there's a structured environment. A lot of being successful in design is about networking, right? So you'll develop great networks through university. Then I'll get into cons. So cons are like the cost of university obviously is pretty expensive. The time it takes to complete university is also a long time, right? And anybody that's familiar with tech knows that it's a fast, ever evolving industry, right? So you might go in and you're trying to learn some sort of standards, and then by the time you're out, the standards are changing, right? And then the people that I know that have studied design in university, there's not a lot of there's a lot of theoretical work and concept work, but there's not a lot of hands-on work. So that's, if you want to go to university road, that's what I'd have to tell you about that. In terms of the self-taught roads, there's definitely a lot of self-taught designers out there. I think with being self-taught, you have to be comfortable with not having the structure of schools. So you definitely can become a designer through the self-taught route. And I know boot camps get a lot of bad rep. I think obviously if you have a design background, boot camps can give you the fundamentals and the understanding the thought process of designers. So I think for people that have a design background, maybe a boot camp is a good route as well. I think before you even choose the avenue that you want to go down, you need to be self-aware. So you need to understand, first of all, is design right for you? Does it align with your values? Does it align with your skills? Obviously anything can be learned. So if you have the drive to learn, then that's fine, jump in. But understanding yourself and understanding your values and what you want out of a career, and then doing your research to see if product design aligns with that. That's the first thing you need to do before you make a choice. Then understanding your learning habits. So I personally went to a boot camp. I went to Career Foundry. I think it's great, but I also had a design background, right? So my journey is not necessarily the typical journey of the majority of people that go through boot camps. So as I said, being self-aware, understanding what your values are, and then seeing if product design aligns with that, and then understanding your learning habits. But whichever route you choose, I think one thing that's a couple of things that are important is getting mentors and coaches. So people that are in the design.
How can people do that? So if you were say somebody is going through the educational process, whether that's self-taught, university, or through a boot camp, say they finish or they're about to be finished, how would you say, what are some suggested routes finding mentors? Are you telling them to research on LinkedIn, Twitter, hashtags? How can somebody go about finding a mentor in the field outside of, you know, a professor at their school?
Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of different ways. Me personally, people reach out to me all the time, and I'm always willing to kind of like share what I know. I think so. What I can talk from my experience, and what I'd suggest people do is like look to your personal network. So you might have people who are in product design um, that you know personally, or you're like 1 degree or 2 degrees of separation away from that person. So, for example, all right, so I have a friend that basically took the same path as me, went to the same schools in Jamaica, both elementary school and high school. Went to U of T together. He lives in Canada. Anybody that knows me and that's watching this video know who I'm talking about. But he was connected with somebody. He's a lot more sociable than me, so he'll make friends more than me. But he was connected to the brother of somebody who also went to our high school, but they were like a couple of years ahead of us. So when I was looking, like, he coincidentally just posted a post on LinkedIn, and I basically hit up my boy, let him know, yo, connect me with this guy. And me and that guy talk every day now, and that guy happens to be like the head of design and research at one of the biggest companies in Canada. So like I just had genuine conversations with him. He was obviously really helpful as well. But like reaching out to people in your personal network. So that's somebody who's in my network who happens to be somebody who's like high up on the design ladder. And we end up talking every day. We're pretty close in age, but he got into this like product design specifically a lot earlier than I did. But like that was something that was really instrumental in kind of getting me to where I am. So as I said, reach out to your personal network. You never know who's in the network. You just have to go and do the work. There's ADP list. So that's amazing design people, I think. So that's Felix Lee's like platform where you can set up calls with mentors there. Reach out to people, just engage in different communities. So like I know Clubhouse is not as buzzing as it was before, but like there was a lot of great design conversations going on there. There's Twitter Spaces. There's like just putting yourself out there. So engaging on Twitter. I was in a lot of Slack groups when I was breaking into design, and just like being not afraid to just message people and be genuine, right? And then like develop relationships that way. So like as I said, I'm not like that social of a person. I don't really like reaching out to people, but I kind of just bit the bullet and did it on my own by reaching out to these people, and then I developed some great relationships. Actually, another thing about personal networks, like one of my friends who I was in high school with here in Canada has a design agency, and that's all of that is just coincidences, right? So you never know who in your network. So start with your personal network, see who is there that's a designer or knows a designer. Join Slack groups, engage on Twitter, like follow design leaders. Like people in the design community generally are pretty helpful. And yeah, I'd say ADP list is also pretty big. When I was breaking into design, ADP list did not exist. So
that's typically how it goes. Some really necessary resources pop up after you already passed that level. But I love it.
Yeah.
So you have 3 options for education. You can self-teach yourself. You can go through a boot camp, or you can go to university. Whatever option you choose, just make sure you're self-aware of what you're really good at and what feeds to your natural abilities. Once you choose one of those and you finish, your baseline education, because like you said, it's a constant constant learning process when you get into design. But say you get your basic foundation skills, now build out your network and start building out your network while you're going through the educational process as well. So you can do this through the ADP list. You can do this through Twitter groups, through LinkedIn, through Facebook groups, especially Facebook groups, Slack groups. You just can type in on Google, product design Slack groups, product design Twitter family, and just do that, and then go and connect and follow these people and interact in the conversations and ask questions. Okay, so number 3. What would you suggest for somebody who's new? Would you suggest them immediately right off trying to start freelancing, or would you suggest they go and seek out employment? I know neither are perfect, but just maybe your specific preference. And then how would they do that? Whatever one you would suggest, how would they go about, say if they decide to go into freelancing, what's the first step to getting your first client? And if they decide to get employment, how should one go about doing that?
Yeah, so that's kind of a catch-22 as well. But I would say that's pretty similar to like developing your network. So there's also like so the answer is going to be pretty similar to before. Like there's Slack groups where people are always looking for work. I think I would say try and engage with a personal network or go like there's Upwork. There's like I've gotten work off Upwork. I've gotten work from people in my personal network that led to other work. So my journey, I started out freelancing, and then those projects helped me to land like a full-time role. I think another like right now the demand for designers is very high. I think like as long as you work on your craft and you have something to show, I think the best managers, whether or not you've like been actively designing, like they can look at your work, whether it's concept work or like any work that you have, and they can talk to you and understand, like get an idea of how you think. And I think the best managers like are willing to give, depending on their specific scenario within their specific team, they're willing to give like good designers who don't necessarily have like a lot of experience a chance, and then you can develop your design skills that way. But I started out by like a lot of people don't like doing free work. I don't necessarily advise that if I'm working on projects, I'll pay people out of pocket to do the work. But I personally did like free work, design work, because I knew what my end goal was, and to develop my skills and to get some like experience under my belt. And then I did the free work to the best of my ability, and that led to people referring me to others who referred me to others. And like I generally just kind of go above and beyond like when I'm working, and like I'm just a naturally hard worker. But there's different ways. Like I can't remember some of the sites off the top, but if anybody wants to know, they can just reach out to me on Twitter. Because I have a list, I just don't have it on hand. But there's sites that you can go that people are always looking for like designers. Try hackathons. There's like not-for-profits that are always looking for people to work on their stuff, and you can't get designers. Like if you want, you can just do your own like redesigns of websites, but use like UX process. Don't just go and like make it pretty. Like talk to people, make people actually use the site, think about the difficulties they have navigating, and then use UX processes to make improvements to the site. So yeah, I would say like I think generally the avenue is, I don't want to say like go freelance and don't apply for jobs, because you never know like who will give you a chance. Once you have like some sort of concept work, people will bring you in for interviews based on that sometimes. But generally they're gonna want to see some sort of tangible work, and they'll want it to be shipped. That's kind of the hard part of getting into design. But yeah, I'd say that the traditional avenue is like getting real projects under your belt through either your personal network, through Slack, people posting work in Slack groups. Then once you do those jobs through those different avenues, then you'll have like a more solid foundation to start applying. But you can also do that and apply simultaneously.
Right.
Yeah,
and I think that one thing that makes me think of is I have a friend that's in design that just got in like a year or 2 years ago. I don't know what particular type of design, but I know that not too many people want to do this, but he basically just posted online, hey, I'm open to doing 5 design projects for free, like in this certain niche or whatever. And people reached out to him, and he did them all for free to the best of his abilities. But now he had a small portfolio that he could take to applying to bigger positions and show them what he did, and he could leverage that in order to at least get an interview and then be able to talk himself into the job from there. So I think that's kind of what you were saying in general anyways.
Mhm.
But yeah, man, I really appreciate all the value you've been dropping today. I think a lot of people will enjoy this episode, especially potential designers or current designers. And then anybody who's just never thought of design or product design before and is just listening to this episode because they support the Culture Talk show, I think will enjoy not only your accent, but also, your story. And then also, like I said, some of the information you shared. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to share some of your social platforms that people can find you on so that they can follow you or reach out to you, whether that's if they have questions about product design or they just want to support you. Or I know you tweet a little bit about sports, or maybe they just want to argue with you about sports. Who knows? But if you want to drop your Twitter handle and any other social platforms or any other plugins, feel free. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the main, I guess the main platform I use, my Instagram is deactivated right now, but the main platform I use is Twitter, and my handle is designer. So designer without an E, so DESIGNR DREW. That's my handle on Twitter, and I guess like for my design, all my design stuff, you can just go to my website, which is Montgomery.ca, and then there'll be links to like my Medium, my Dribble, my Behance on there. But yeah, the best way to catch me is on Twitter. Oh, and yeah, I guess my Clubhouse handle as well is designer with no E before the R, Drew. So you can catch me both places with the same handle.
Perfect. And I will tag those below, ladies and gentlemen, if you were too slow to catch that. So feel free to check out the description below for his social handles. Please follow him, support him, support his journey, ask him questions if you have any questions about design. And again, build out your guys' network. Here's a start, here's a start right now. Here's an individual that you've heard on a podcast. He's accessible. Reach out and contact him. Again, thank you, Drew. I do want you to share one last thing, and the thing is, well, I want you to answer one last question, and the question is, if it's your last day on earth, you're 975 years old, you've lived a long, fruitful life, and your great grandkids are sitting at your feet, and they ask you, great grandpa Drew, what's one piece of advice on how to live life? And it's the last thing they'll remember you by. What's that piece of advice that you're going to give them?
Yeah, I'd say never be afraid to take risks. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. At the end of the day, take as many risks as you can, and also like do what's best for you.
I love it. I love it. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for tuning into the Culture Talk show. Drew, thank you again. Ladies and gentlemen, have a blessed day. I'm going to sign you guys off with what do I want to say? Let me say, how do I say bye in all right, let's see, what language do I want to use? Okay, we're going to say bye in Farsi. So we're signing off. Khudafis.